Shikeya nejune benashni, Shikeya nejune benashni, God nikide shatlisin, God nikiniya oh God nikiniya oh hey neya, Shehawan nejune benashni, Shehawan nejune benashni. God nikide shatlisin, God nikiniyo.
It is very important to us because that's where our ancestors, the spirits of our ancestors live. We go there for a spiritual, physical, mental health on a daily basis.
And just to think that the possibility exists that with the leadership in the White House could eliminate this or to shrink it or to make it any less powerful place really bothers me. And it should bother all of us.
Bears Ears is a place of healing for Native people. Bears Ears is a place where we hold ceremonies. And those ceremonies are very significant to Native people, because those are the things that the Creator made for us, and it allows us as Native people to have contact with the Creator. And yes, and that's why Bears Ears is a holy ground.
Public lands have always been controversial in Utah. You know, that's always the case in the American West. The fact that so much of the land belongs to the nation and not to individual people or to states, it's always been controversial. And so there have always been debates over what's the appropriate use of public lands.
My priority for public lands that we have here throughout the state of Utah, and mind you, less than 25% of our land mass in Utah is private land. So we significantly have a lot more public lands that in the state of Utah than virtually any other state other than Nevada in the continental 48 states. So having the optimal management, bringing it to the optimal level on behalf of the public, which includes farming, ranching, tourism, travel, camping, hiking, hunting, the conservation efforts we've put a lot of effort in, as well as extraction industries, including, but not limited to, energy development.
Why would the state of Utah be promoting coal mining and burning coal as the future of the economy of the state? It's a great question. There's no good answer. It's incredibly short-sighted. It's incredibly stupid. Anybody can tell you that's not where our future lies. Utah has rabidly anti-environment politicians, it's plain and simple, from the governor, the senators, the representatives down to the county commissions. You got a collection of people that want to seize public lands for their controls, that have very little respect for environmental protection, that have sued the federal government repeatedly to try to seize control. And that's why these two monuments are threatened, because the Utah politicians went to Trump and ask him to remove the protection for these places.
In the proclamation, mining and oil, any new mining or oil leases or rights would cease to exist. It will be protected from mining and drilling henceforth. But in the national monument, the proclamation does preserve, ranching, traditional practices of gathering medicinal plants, gathering firewood, which is important to the locals. And so it becomes it would become a national monument that would preserve cultural practices for the local population while keeping destructive extraction industries from creating much damage to the region.
We're cautious, we're worried as cattle ranchers. If the Bears Ears Monument is established and there's pressure put on from environmental organizations to get the cattle off of public land. The cattle were here a long time ago, long before the BLM was here, long before the environmental organizations were here. Those who say that cattlemen don't belong on the public land, that cattlemen overgraze, it's a false narrative. It's a tactic to try and get the federal government and the BLM to remove cattle from grazing on public land. And I'm 100% against that kind of narrative and that kind of thinking, because those rights were established by those early pioneers that came here.
We look at families that settled in San Juan County in the 1880s. They've been good stewards of the land. I think that's the most important aspect as we debate monument designation versus traditional multiple use. So what would we want? By policy, we've asked the Secretary to rescind the Bears Ears National Monument fully and completely.
There are more cultural resources or archaeological sites in the Bears Ears than any other place in our country. So we have this incredible preservation of cultural resources here that you don't get, even though there were lots of people living all over North America, a lot of their evidence is gone. But here you have rock art and ruins and all the things that attract people that come here. And so the cultural resources are the best anywhere in this country. Well, when we say that there's at least 100,000 archaeological sites within the new Bears Ears National Monument, an archaeological site isn't finding, for instance, one arrowhead laying on the ground. That's not an archaeological site. It has to have enough components to it that shows that people used that area and did something there, not just an isolated find. So we have massive amounts of true archaeological sites here. They might not be all of them, gorgeous cliff ruins, which attract everyone, or huge rock art panels. They could be little rubble mounds and things where people lived, and they haven't been excavated. We don't really know what's down below them, and so the whole archaeological cultural resource thing, it's huge here, and it deserves our attention and to visit with a lot more respect than we have.
As famous as the American Southwest is for its ancient Americans, my ancestors, and it's far from being complete and being logistically mapped, comprehensively mapped. The ruins here in the Bears Ears National Monument, they still have people buried in them. I think I just asked for just the humanity and the civility to not mutilate or desecrate by drilling. And
a national monument status, one, should give you more resources to protect the place, and it also protects the place from mineral and gas and oil exploration, which I think is a really important factor here, considering the amount of cultural resources we have in this place.
They're finding them a lot more down here. I'm already feeling like there's fossils up here because I saw petrified wood.
So part of the deposit is in the monument and part of the deposit is outside of the monument, but it's a continuous deposit. So if fossils, paleontological resources, are explicitly called out in the proclamation, in order to be protected by the monument. And the Antiquities Act says that the objects to be conserved need to be contained within the smallest possible area, and this deposit is cut by the monument boundary, then the monument is smaller than the smallest possible area that it needs to be to conserve those objects. In this case, the monument should probably be expanded to include the entire deposit as opposed to only a part of it.
People to not only recreate but find a place of solace and quiet. It's a place for families to get together. It's extremely important to local economies. It takes care of our environmental concerns like clean air, clean water. By protecting these places, we are protecting the future health of the planet for our kids and generations to come.
And it also says what is the value of setting lands aside if you're just going to destroy that protection later down the road. That's not right.
An attack on one is an attack on all, to put it simply, just in short. That if they take away Bears Ears, which from my understanding has never been done, taking away a national monument, that they will continue to do that for resource extraction or whatever they please. So I feel like this is, the stand for Bears Ears or the stand for Grand Staircase is a lot bigger than it might seem.
The Sutherland Institute is a conservative think tank located here in Salt Lake City. We advocate for a variety of principles, free markets, limited government, federalism, and of course, local voices.
So Sutherland Institute is a member of the State Policy Network. There's 50 entities that every state's got a member. And the State Policy Network receives its money from the Koch brothers and other ultra-conservative billionaire funders, and they have an ideologically driven mission to sort of infuse right-wing policies across the board. In Utah, a lot of that ends up having to do with public lands policy, and they've been one of the largest voices in the Rescind Bears Ears campaign.
I work as a policy analyst for the Coalition for Self-Government in the West. It's a project of the Sutherland Institute, and it deals with public lands issues. And so I engage on a variety of topics: sage grouse, wild horses, forest fires, and most recently, the Bears Ears National Monument.
The current administration has given a huge voice to these far right-wing think tanks like the Sutherland Institute. And so for the first time, maybe in their history, certainly in quite a few years, the Sutherland Institute has a voice and an outlet, and you saw that when Ryan Zinke visited Bears Ears and the secretary went on a hike with Matt Anderson. There are pictures where, Secretary Zinke's literally, I don't know how long they were on that hike for, but for quite some time was giving, this guy with the far-right think tank was getting, significant FaceTime with the Secretary of the Interior.
Unfortunately, there's a false narrative that's being put out by those on the environmental left that we can't have multiple uses of our public lands and that one use means that you can't have another. This is a false narrative. Our public lands can and ought to be put to multiple uses, and they can even complement each other. And that's what we're hoping for with Bears Ears. The designation by President Obama last year was not about sensible land management solutions. It was about other motivations like a presidential legacy, climate change, appealing to corporate interests like rock climbing associations and outdoor retailers. It wasn't about protecting the archaeological resources themselves. So the simple fact is it the antiquities that we're trying to protect, or is it something else? The data would lead us to believe it's other motivations.
The governor of Utah has approved massive litigation, the largest and ongoing litigation ever filed against the United States trying to seize control of right-of-ways across these same landscapes. Not for economic reasons, but to prove that, I think to certain constituents, that the state of Utah should be in charge of these lands, not the federal government. And it really comes down to that issue of who is in charge. It's an egotistical, ideological argument, not based on economic concerns, for example. I mean, the best thing would be for everybody to start acting like a bunch of grown-ups and say, everyone acknowledges these resources are incredible, that they are threatened, that they need more management, they need more funding. The Utah Congressional Delegation, if they care about this place, could make sure that the Department of Interior has adequate funding to protect these cultural sites, instead of throwing an immature fistfight and trying to get Trump to remove the protection, which will be the worst thing that could possibly happen to the place.
I've come to Utah to take a very historic action. I will sign 2 presidential proclamations. These actions will modify the national monuments designations of both Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante. I will now, with your representatives, sign this very, very important proclamation. Thank you very much, everyone.
To the ear of President Trump, who was, kind of destined, I guess, to be in this position at this time and do something for us. It feels like a small miracle, a Christmas miracle, and it's a wonderful thing.
Of Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante is nothing to be proud of. We know that we are judged by what we do to Mother Earth, and the future will judge us by what we leave behind. We are tired of going down that coal mine hole. We are done with those days. It is time to move forward. It is time for renewable energy. It is your time to be visible and to share the importance of everyone rising up in this country and saying no to our president. Thank you.
And historically, I understand this is the first time that a sitting president is trying to challenge the executive order of a public land conservation and national monument status. And it's quite it's surreal. It's an extraordinary time that we live in right now. But I'm always an optimist.
Well, the fortunate thing is that Utah's history, despite our politicians being so anti-environment, we've increased the amount of protection significantly over the years. And that's because these are national lands that belong to all Americans, and there has been a national movement that succeeded in increasing the amount of protection one step at a time. And that history will probably continue despite Utah's politicians.